Here's a concise summary highlighting the key points. 1. Aurangzeb's death and burial. Aurangzeb, the last powerful Mughal emperor, died on February 20th, 1707, and was buried in a simple grave in Kuldabad, Deccan. 2. Decline of the Mughal Empire. After Aurangzeb's death, the Mughal Empire weakened due to internal conflicts, weak leadership, and succession disputes. This led to a loss of central authority, especially in the Deccan region. 3. Maratha expansion. The Marathas, under the leadership of Baji Rao, took advantage of the Mughal decline and expanded their control over central and western India. They conducted devastating raids on Mughal territories, but were also known for being fair rulers in their own lands during peaceful times. 4. Mughal succession issues. The Mughal Empire faced several succession crises, with multiple emperors being murdered or deposed, leading to instability. In 1719, 4 different emperors occupied the throne in quick succession. 5. Maratha Confederacy. The Marathas were organized under a confederacy of 5 main chieftains: the Peshwa in Maharashtra, Bansal in Orissa, Gaikwad in Gujarat, Holkar in central India, and Scindia in Rajasthan and northern India. 6. Smooth administrative transition. The Marathas adopted many Mughal administrative practices, ensuring a relatively smooth transition of power from the Mughals to the Marathas. 7. End of Mughal authority. The combination of internal decay and external Maratha pressure led to the disintegration of Mughal authority in much of India, setting the stage for new power dynamics in the region. Let's break down this information in the simplest way possible, step by step, so it's easy to understand. Mughal governors and their changing roles. 1. The decline of the Mughal Empire. The Mughal Empire was once a powerful force in India, but as time went on, it started to weaken. One big reason was the rise of the Marathas, a strong group that began to take over more and more land. 2. Mughal governors acting independently. As the Mughal central power weakened, the regional governors, who were supposed to follow the Mughal emperor's orders, started to act on their own. They began to rule their regions like they were independent kings. 3. Nizam-ul-Mulk in the Deccan. Who was Nizam-ul-Mulk? Nizam-ul-Mulk, also known as Chinchillich Khan, was a powerful general of the Mughal emperor Aurangzeb. What did he do? In 1724, he left the capital, Delhi, without asking permission from the young emperor, Muhammad Shah. He went to the Deccan, a region in southern India, and took over as the governor. He defeated the governor that the emperor had chosen. Result: Nizam-ul-Mulk set up his own power base in Hyderabad and ruled it almost like an independent king. 4. Saadat Khan in Awadh. Who was Saadat Khan? Saadat Khan was another regional governor in the area known as Awadh, present-day Uttar Pradesh. What did he do? Saadat Khan, along with his nephew Safdar Jung, started to control the region as if they were independent rulers. They became the main powers in the north of India, with their base in Faizabad. 5. Governors acting like kings. Even though these governors still claimed to be loyal to the Mughal emperor, they acted more and more like independent kings. They used the emperor's name to show they were in charge, but they were really ruling on their own terms. 6. Founding of dynasties. Both Nizam-ul-Mulk and Saadat Khan established families that ruled their regions for about 100 years, almost like new royal families. 7. Bengal. Who was Murshid Quli Khan? Murshid Quli Khan was the governor of Bengal, a very rich region in eastern India. What did he do differently? Unlike the other governors, Murshid Quli Khan stayed loyal to the Mughal emperor. He sent a large amount of money every year to the central government in Delhi. His harsh rule. To collect this money, Murshid Quli Khan was very strict. He punished those who didn't pay taxes on time in cruel ways, like throwing them into pits filled with human waste or putting live cats in their pants to scare them into paying up. Key points to remember. As the Mughal Empire weakened, its governors started acting like independent rulers. Nizam-ul-Mulk in the Deccan and Saadat Khan in Awadh were key examples of this trend. Both governors founded dynasties that ruled for many years. Bengal's governor, Murshid Quli Khan, remained loyal but was very harsh in collecting taxes. This marked the beginning of the end for the Mughal Empire's central control, with regional powers becoming more like independent states. Let's break down the information in a simple step-by-step manner to understand what happened between the East India Company, EIC, and the Mughal Empire. Background: the decline of Mughal power. 1. Mughal Empire weakening. The Mughal Empire, once a dominant force in India, was losing its power. This created a situation where others could challenge their authority more easily. 2. The rise of the East India Company. The East India Company, EIC, was a British trading company. It came to India to trade spices, silk, cotton, and other goods. As the Mughal power weakened, the EIC saw an opportunity to gain more control and influence in India. Conflicts with the Mughal governors. Disrespect toward Mughal authority. Even during the last years of Aurangzeb's rule, a strong Mughal emperor, the EIC started showing less respect towards Mughal authority. For example, in 1701, Daud Khan, the Mughal governor of the Carnatic region in South India, complained that the EIC officials in Madras, now Chennai, were not respecting him and were acting arrogantly. They were not providing the correct financial accounts of the taxes they owed for things like tobacco, betel, a type of nut, and wine. 2. EIC's response and strategy. The EIC's representative, Nicolau Manucci, responded by saying that if Daud Khan taxed them too heavily, they would simply move their business to another place. This was a threat that the local economy would suffer, especially the weavers and merchants who depended on trade with the EIC. This threat worked, and Daud Khan decided not to push further. Escalation of tensions. 1. Increased aggression by the EIC. In 1710, the EIC took more aggressive action when 2 Englishmen were seized, and there was a brief siege by the Mughal fort keeper of Jinji. The EIC officials from Fort St. David, near Madras, went on the offensive. They attacked Mughal-held territories, destroying villages, crops, and killing innocent villagers along the Coromandel coast, southeastern coast of India. 2. Impact of EIC's actions. This was a significant shift because it was one of the first major violent acts by the British against ordinary Indian people. The Mughal government was forced to reconcile with the EIC, and even the EIC directors in London approved of this violent show of strength, believing it would create fear and respect for the British among the local people. Conflict in Bengal. 1. Tensions in Bengal. In Bengal, the regional governor, Murshid Quli Khan, was unhappy with the behavior of the EIC. He found the British officials rude and aggressive. He complained to the Mughal court in Delhi, saying that the EIC was behaving dishonestly. They built a strong fort, collected their own taxes, and even captured people, turning them into slaves. 2. Mughal government's limited response. Despite these complaints, the Mughal government in Delhi was too preoccupied with other issues to take strong action against the EIC. Summary and key points. As Mughal power weakened, the EIC became more aggressive and started acting like a ruler in its own right, rather than just a trading company. The EIC used threats and military force to get what it wanted from local Mughal governors. The EIC's actions set a precedent for how they would operate in India in the future, often using force or the threat of economic consequences to assert their power. This was the beginning of a shift from trading and commerce to political and military control by the British in India. Examples to understand better. Think of a school. Imagine a school where the principal is getting weaker and cannot enforce rules effectively. Some of the teachers, like the Mughal governors, start acting like they are in charge of their own classrooms without following the principal's rules. Meanwhile, a group of students, like the EIC, starts behaving arrogantly and takes over the playground, saying they will leave if the teachers try to control them too much. Modern companies. This is similar to how big companies today might threaten to move their business to another country if they are taxed too heavily, trying to get better deals from governments. Here's a simplified explanation of the passage. Key points. 1. European companies in India. The two European powers in question are rival trading companies, the British East India Company, EIC, based in Madras, and the French East India Company, Compagnie des Indes, based in Pondicherry. 2. Opportunity from Mughal decline. The Mughal Empire was weakening and losing control over its territories. This created chaos and instability, anarchy, in the heartlands of the empire, meaning there wasn't a strong central government to maintain order. The decline of the Mughal power created an opportunity for these European companies to increase their influence and control in India. 3. Recruitment of private forces. Seeing the empire's weakness, these European companies started to recruit their own private security forces. This means they hired soldiers to protect their interests and expand their power. They offered good wages to attract local Indian infantry troops, who were the soldiers who fought on foot. This allowed them to build a small, loyal army. 4. Influence of Nader Shah's invasion. Nader Shah, a Persian ruler, invaded India and easily captured the Mughal capital. This showed how weak the Mughal Empire had become. This event inspired the European companies. They saw how a small foreign force could conquer a large territory and started thinking they could do the same in India. Number 5. Joseph-François Duplessis' ambitions. In Pondicherry, Joseph-François Duplessis, the new Director General of the French East India Company, was watching the situation closely. On January 5, 1739, before Nader Shah even reached the Mughal forces at Karnal, Duplessis predicted a Great Revolution, or major change in the Indian Empire due to its weakness. Duplessis believed that while the instability, or revolution, caused by Nader Shah's invasion might disrupt trade temporarily, it would ultimately benefit Europeans by giving them more opportunities to expand their influence. Summary. As the Mughal Empire weakened, two European trading companies, the British in Madras and the French in Pondicherry, saw an opportunity to expand their power in India. They began recruiting and training local soldiers to build their own private armies. Inspired by how easily Nader Shah of Persia had taken over Delhi, the Europeans began to dream of conquering parts of India themselves. Joseph-François Duplessis, the French leader in Pondicherry, foresaw a major change coming in the empire, which he believed would ultimately benefit interests. Here's a simplified summary of the passage. Key points. 1. Duplessis' career. Joseph-François Duplessis arrived in India as a young man and advanced in the French East India Company, Compagnie des Indes, which was initially slow to capitalize on India's trading opportunities. 2. French East India Company. The French started their company in 1664, but it struggled financially. By 1719, financier John Law de Lauriston refounded the company, combining two insolvent firms. However, the company remained underfunded compared to the British East India Company, EIC. 3. Governance and reforms. In 1742, Duplessis became governor of Pondicherry and Director General of the Compagnie des Indes in India. He successfully petitioned the Mughal Emperor to grant him the rank of Nawab and the right for Pondicherry to mint coins. Number 4. Military initiatives. Recognizing the weakened Mughal authority, Duplessis increased the company's military strength by training local warriors in European tactics. By 1746, he established 2 regiments of sepoys, Indian soldiers, trained in modern European methods. 5. Partnerships and personal wealth. Duplessis was also involved in private trading ventures, partnering with Indian traders and moneylenders. He aimed to remain neutral in the growing Anglo-French rivalry to protect his commercial interests. Summary. Joseph-François Duplessis, who rose through the ranks of the French East India Company, played a crucial role in expanding French influence in India. He improved the company's military capabilities, made strategic alliances, and used his position to gain economic benefits. His actions were driven by both his official duties and personal trading interests. Here's a simple breakdown of the situation. 1. Economic and military strength. France had a much bigger economy, more people, and the largest army in Europe in the 1740s. Britain had a larger navy, more ships, and was very skilled at raising money for wars quickly. 2. Duplessis' goal. Joseph-François Duplessis was the French leader in Pondicherry, a French trading post in India. He wanted to keep his trading business safe and avoid conflict. 3. War breaks out. France and Britain started fighting each other in Europe in the War of Austrian Succession. Duplessis wanted to ensure that the French in India wouldn't be the first to start fighting. 4. British response. Governor Morse of Madras, a British settlement, knew that a British naval squadron, group of ships, was coming to India. He did not have the power to agree to Duplessis' request for neutrality and did not inform him of the imminent arrival of the British squadron. 5. British attack. In February 1745, the British squadron arrived French ships. They seized several ships, including one that was very important to Duplessis financially. Here's a simplified explanation of what happened. 1. Seeking compensation. After the British attacked French ships, Duplessis tried to get compensation from the British settlement in Madras. When his request was denied, he decided to retaliate. 2. Planning the attack. Duplessis called for a French naval squadron from Ile de Bourbon, now Mauritius, and sent his chief engineer, Paradis, to inspect Madras's defenses. Paradis reported that Madras's defenses were weak and its governor was inadequate. 3. Preparing for siege. Duplessis used his own money to repair and strengthen the walls of Pondicherry. He was confident that the British East India Company would fail and expressed this belief to his secretary. 4. Reinforcements arrive. By early September, Duplessis received reinforcements of around 4,000 troops, including well-trained African soldiers and advanced artillery. These troops were transported quickly to the area south of Madras. 5. Surprise attack. Instead of attacking from the expected direction, Duplessis' forces moved in from behind the British lines. They laid siege to Madras on September 18th with a heavy bombardment of mortars. 6. Impact of the siege. The intense bombardment caused stress and panic among the British defenders. The chief gunner, Mr. Smith, died from a heart attack due to the stress of the situation. Summary. Duplessis, angered by the British attack, decided to strike back. He gathered a strong force, repaired his own defenses, and then launched a surprise at Madras. The attack was... Here's a simplified breakdown of what happened. 1. Defenses of Madras. The British garrison in Madras was very small, only 300 soldiers. Half of them were Indo-Portuguese guards who weren't eager to fight, and the rest were British merchants with no military training. 2. Surrender of Madras. Within 3 days of the French siege, many British soldiers deserted. Governor Morse, unable to defend Madras, decided to negotiate. On September 20, 1746, Madras surrendered to the French with minimal casualties, 6 British deaths, and no French losses. 3. Duplessis' victory. Ananda Rangapillai described the French victory dramatically, likening their assault to a lion attacking a herd of elephants and praising their dominance. 4. Conflict with the Nawab. The Mughal Nawab of the Carnatic, Anwar-ud-Din, was enraged because Duplessis had attacked Madras without his permission and had not returned the town to Mughal control. To punish the French, Anwar-ud-Din sent his son, Mahfuz Khan, with the Mughal army to confront them. 5. Battle with Mughal forces. On October 24, 1746, Mahfuz Khan tried to block 700 French sepoys led by Paradis from reaching Madras. Despite being heavily outnumbered, 10,000 Mughal soldiers, the French used new tactics with muskets and artillery to fend off the attack. They created a defensive position using palmyra trees along the Adyar River's estuary to protect themselves. Summary. The French quickly took Madras due to its poorly defended garrison. However, the Nawab of the Carnatic was upset with the French actions and sent front them. In a significant battle, the French successfully defended against the much larger Mughal force using innovative military tactics. Here's a simplified explanation of the battle and its impact. 1. French strategy. The French commander, Paradis, organized his soldiers and sepoys into 4 divisions, each tasked with attacking different parts of the Mughal army. He led the main division himself. 2. Mughal response. The Mughal forces fired rockets and cannons, but these had little effect as they fell into the river and caused no damage. The French then responded with a volley of gunfire, which killed many Mughal soldiers. Number 3. Mughal defeat. Overwhelmed by the French firepower, the Mughal troops abandoned their weapons and fled in panic. Many Mughal soldiers were killed while fleeing. Mahfuz Khan, the Mughal leader, also fled on foot, then mounted an elephant to escape. The Mughal retreat continued until they reached Kunatar. 4. Aftermath. The Mughal army's defeat was so complete that the area of Mylapore was deserted, with no animals or people in sight. Number 5. Different accounts. Some accounts suggest the French attacked at night, catching the Mughal army off guard and causing confusion. Regardless of the exact details, the Battle of Adyar River was a significant turning point. 6. Significance. The battle demonstrated the effectiveness of European military techniques, which were superior to the Mughal methods at the time. The French loss was minimal compared to the Mughal casualties, marking a decisive moment in the struggle for dominance in India. In essence, the French victory at Adyar River showcased their advanced military tactics and marked a major shift in power dynamics in the region. In 1749, a peace treaty called the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle ended the War of the Austrian Succession. According to the treaty, the British East India Company, EIC, should get Madras back. However, despite the peace agreement, fighting continued because of actions by the French. Here's a step-by-step breakdown. 1. French actions. Duplessis' plan. Duplessis was the French leader in India. Even though there was supposed to be peace, he decided to keep his soldiers and use them to help his Indian allies. His goal was to gain more land and power, not just in battle, but also through political maneuvers. 2. British response. Governor Floyer's report. Charles Floyer was the new British governor of Madras. He reported that, even with peace declared, the situation was tense because Duplessis was still acting against the British. British concerns. The directors of the East India Company in London were worried. They knew that the French were not respecting the peace and were breaking international rules to gain more power and riches. 3. British orders. Prepare for future conflicts. The British officials were told to strengthen their defenses and stay alert. They were instructed to be ready for any future attacks because, even though there was peace now, it might not last forever. They needed to be prepared for any new conflicts or threats. In simple terms, the peace treaty didn't stop the fighting because Duplessis kept trying to expand French influence. The British, knowing this, worked on improving their defenses to be ready for any future problems. Let's break this down step by step in the simplest way. Had Duplessis as a military entrepreneur. Who was Duplessis? Duplessis was a French leader in India during the 1700s. He was in charge of the French company and had control over French soldiers and resources in India. Military entrepreneur? What does this mean? A military entrepreneur is someone who uses soldiers and military power to make money and gain influence. Instead of just being a regular businessman who sells products like cotton, Duplessis sold military services. How did Duplessis make money? Land grants and revenue rights. Indian rulers who wanted to use Duplessis' soldiers had to pay him. But instead of just giving him cash, they gave him land and the right to collect taxes from that land. Why this was smart? This way, Duplessis could pay and maintain his soldiers, called sepoys, using the money from these lands instead of needing to bring money from France. Duplessis' business strategy. 1. Helping in the Carnatic. The Carnatic was a region in southern India. There was a fight over who should be the next ruler. Duplessis' role. Duplessis sold his soldiers' services to one of the people who wanted to be the ruler. By doing this, he gained more influence and power. 2. The bigger move to Hyderabad. After this success, Duplessis decided to take on an even bigger challenge. He sent his top general, the Marquis de Bussy, to Hyderabad. Hyderabad's situation. The powerful Mughal leader of Hyderabad, Nizam-ul-Mulk, had died, and his sons were fighting over who would control the region. Duplay's plan. Bussy and his troops took sides in this fight, helping one of the sons to win. Duplay's rewards. What did he get? For helping in Hyderabad, Duplay received a huge sum of money at the time. Mansab of 7,000 horse. This was a very high rank in the Mughal Empire, similar to being made a duke in Europe. Port of Masulipatam, a valuable and rich port on the coast. Jagir, a landed estate that gave him an income of £20,000 every year. The big realization, more profitable than textiles. Duplay realized that selling military services, like being a mercenary, was a lot more profitable than just trading goods like cotton textiles. Why this matters. By using his soldiers to help Indian rulers, Duplay could gain land, money, and power, making the French presence in India much stronger and more influential. Simplified summary. Let's break this down into simple steps. Who is Marquis de Bussy? Marquis de Bussy was a top general under Duplay, the French leader in India. He was responsible for leading French troops in battles and other military actions in India. What did Marquis de Bussy do? Small mercenary force. Marquis de Bussy commanded a small group of highly trained soldiers. These soldiers were like hired fighters, known as mercenaries, who fought for money or rewards. Achievements of Marquis de Bussy. In the Deccan. The Deccan is a large region in central India. Marquis de Bussy led his small army through this region, helping different rulers with their battles. Dramatic success. Despite having a small force, Bussy achieved incredible results, placing kings on thrones. He helped certain rulers become kings, affecting who would rule in various regions. Defeating armies. Even though his army was small, they were able to defeat much larger armies. Let's break down this passage into simple and easy to understand language. Context. Post-Mughal India. After the fall of the Mughal Empire, India became fragmented into many smaller, weaker states. The rulers of these states were often desperate and needed help to maintain or expand their power. Two-way transactions. Indian rulers and European companies. These Indian rulers started making deals with European trading companies like the British East India Company, EIC, and the French Compagnie. In these deals, the Indian rulers would offer large pieces of land or the right to collect taxes, land revenue, in exchange for military support from the European companies. Military edge of Europeans. European military superiority. Although the European companies often had very small armies, they had a clear military advantage over the traditional Indian cavalry, soldiers on horseback. These small European forces were able to influence and even change the balance of power in these fragmented Indian states. Carnatic Wars. Wars with mixed outcomes. The Carnatic Wars were a series of conflicts between the British and French in southern India. While these wars didn't always have clear winners or lasting results, they were important for several reasons. Transformation of companies. The British and French trading companies started to change. They were no longer just focused on trade, like selling textiles or pepper, but were becoming more like military organizations. They began acting as mercenaries, providing military services for money, land, or other rewards. Rise of military influence. The companies became part traders and part military forces, with the military aspect becoming increasingly profitable. British observations. Learning from the French. The British closely watched the success of the French, especially Duplay, who was very successful in using his military forces to gain power and influence. British confidence. British officers, like Colonel Mills, believed that the Mughal rulers and their armies were weak, and that any determined European power could easily conquer these fragmented Indian states. The British governor of Madras, Thomas Saunders, also agreed, stating that the Indian rulers, referred to as Moors, were so weak that any European military force could potentially take over large parts of the country.
The bigger picture, rivalry between Britain and France. In the mid-1700s, Britain and France were competing fiercely for power and wealth around the world. This competition wasn't just happening in Europe. It was happening in their colonies too, places like India and North America. Focus on North America, where this story takes place. The story happens in North America, particularly in a region called the Ohio River Valley. This area is located in what we now call the United States and was a place where both Britain and France wanted control. Back then, North America was divided into different areas controlled by European countries like Britain and France, as well as the Native American tribes who lived there. The event, the Raid on Pickawillany. On June 21, 1752, a Frenchman named Charles Langlade led a group of Native American warriors on a surprise attack against a British settlement called Pickawillany. Pickawillany was a small village where British settlers, people who had moved from Britain to start a new life, lived. The British were trying to expand their control over this area. But the French wanted to stop them. Who was involved? Charles Langlade was French but had strong ties with several Native American tribes, like the Huron, Seneca, Iroquois, and Macmac. These tribes were aligned with the French and didn't want the British to take over more land. The attack group was made up of about 240 Native American warriors. The attack. What happened during the raid? The attackers caught the British settlers completely off guard. The settlers didn't have enough time or resources to mount a strong defense. Only about 20 British settlers managed to gather inside a fort-like structure called a stockade, but they were overwhelmed by the larger attacking force. The attack was very brutal. The attackers killed two of the settlers in particularly gruesome ways. They scalped, cut off the skin from the top of the head. One man, and another man was boiled, and parts of his body were eaten. Why this is important? Significance of the raid. This raid was a sign of the growing conflict between Britain and France in North America. Both countries were trying to control more land. And this kind of violence showed how serious the fight was becoming. The attack on Pickawillany didn't just affect the people in that small settlement. It was part of a bigger struggle that eventually led to a much larger conflict known as the 7 Years' War. The bigger conflict, what happens next? The tension between Britain and France kept increasing, not just in North America but also in other parts of the world like India. Eventually, these small skirmishes, like the raid on Pickawillany, turned into a full-blown war, where both countries fought each other across many different continents. This war is called the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763. And it had a huge world history.
Let's break this down into simpler terms. 1. Meeting of the East India Company directors. On February 13, 1756, the leaders of the East India Company met in their office on Leadenhall Street. They were reviewing a report about French military activity and discussing what it meant. 2. Key concerns. The directors were worried because the French were showing aggression in America, which suggested that war was likely. They thought that the French might be planning a major attack on their interests in India. 3. The French plan. The directors suspected that the French, led by Dupleix, a key French figure, wanted to take over British territories in India. They feared that the French might replace the British East India Company with their own French company. 4. Action taken. The directors decided to send the information to Roger Drake, who was the governor of Fort William in Calcutta, a key British settlement in India. They wanted Drake to prepare for possible French attacks on either Calcutta or Madras, another important British settlement. They advised Drake to be very cautious and to strengthen defenses. 5. Concerns about Fort William. The directors noted that the fortifications at Fort William were not strong enough to defend against a serious attack. They were also worried because there had been a lack of military recruits in Bengal, where Fort William was located. Therefore, they told Drake to take all necessary actions to protect the British interests in Bengal and ensure the safety of their assets. Simplified example. Imagine you're part of a team managing a very important office. You get a report that suggests a rival company might be planning a big attack on your office. You and your team then meet to discuss what this means. You decide to warn your main office manager in another city to prepare for a possible attack. You ask them to make sure that their defenses are strong enough to handle any threats and to take action to protect everything that belongs to your company. Let's break this down into the simplest terms. 1. Details of the French fleet. The directors of the East India Company learned that 11 French ships had left Port Lorient in mid-November. These ships carried about 3,000 men. 6 of the ships were large and carried guns to protect the other 5 ships, which were fully loaded with supplies. 4 more French ships had left earlier, making a total of 15 ships. They heard that more ships might be sent. Since none of these ships were headed for China, the directors thought the French were targeting India, specifically the coast of Coromandel or Bengal. 2. Instructions for defense. The directors wanted the governor of Fort William in Calcutta to prepare for a possible French attack. They instructed him to strengthen the defenses of the settlement, stay alert and ready to respond to threats, ask for help from other British settlements if needed, recruit more European soldiers to strengthen the garrison, military force, request additional troops from other British places like Fort George, Madras, and Bombay. Keep in touch with British military leaders for support. 3. Cooperation with local leaders. The directors advised engaging the Nawab of Bengal, Aliverdi Khan, to prevent any conflict between British and French forces in Bengal. They believed it was in the Nawab's interest to help maintain peace and expected that the Nawab would support their efforts. 4. Confidentiality. The directors stressed the importance of keeping all this information secret to prevent the French from discovering their plans. They warned that if the French found out, it could have serious consequences. Here's a simple breakdown of what happened. 1. The flawed intelligence. The detailed report suggested that a French fleet was headed to India to attack British territories. However, the report was incorrect. The French fleet was not going to India. It was actually headed elsewhere, and no French fleet went to Bengal in 1755. When the French did send a fleet later in December 1756, it was heading to Pondicherry, not Calcutta. 2. Impact of the report. Despite being wrong, the report was taken seriously because it was detailed and appeared credible. The information was quickly sent from Port Lorient, where the ships were, to London and then to Calcutta, in India. On receiving the report, Governor Drake of Calcutta took immediate action. He ordered the strengthening and rebuilding of the city walls to prepare for a possible attack. However, this action was against the wishes of the Nawab of Bengal, the local ruler. 3. Chain reaction. Rebuilding the city walls without the Nawab's permission caused tension and conflict. This led to further troubles for both the local people in Bengal and the French in India, setting off a series of unfortunate events. 4. Robert Clive's new role. Before this intelligence issue, Robert Clive was a member of Parliament, MP, but lost his seat due to election problems. The East India Company saw an opportunity and offered him a job. Clive was known for his ambition and strong personality. The company wanted him to help with their operations in India, and Clive accepted the offer. Simplified example. Imagine you receive a detailed but incorrect report that a rival team is planning to attack your home. You start making big preparations, like reinforcing the walls, But this makes your neighbors angry because you didn't ask them first. Meanwhile, you hire someone with a strong background to deal with this issue. In the same way, the East India Company prepared for a French attack based on wrong information, which led to conflicts and complications. Clive, who was previously out of a job, was brought in to help manage the crisis. Robert Clive's situation. Background. Initial success. Robert Clive had made a lot of money in India by the age of 28. He returned to Britain intending to enter politics and used his wealth to buy a seat in Parliament. Political failure. However, Clive's political career did not go as planned. He was ejected from the House of Commons due to issues with his election process. Current status. Retirement and reinstatement. Clive had retired from the East India Company, but was brought back into service unexpectedly on the 25th of March, 1755. This move surprised many because he had already amassed a significant fortune and was planning to focus on his political career. Reason for return. Financial and career rebuild. After his political failure and financial losses, returning to the East India Company was Clive's best option to rebuild his fortune and possibly set up for another attempt at politics in the future. Simplified example. Imagine a very successful company that is crucial to the country's trade. It imports a huge amount of tea, silk, and cloth, and makes a lot of money from it. The company is also deeply in debt, but has a powerful position and a special agreement to trade with Asia. Robert Clive, who had made a lot of money in the company and then tried to become a politician, faced setbacks and was removed from his political position. Now, he's given a chance to return to the company, financial problems, and maybe try politics again later. Let's break it down further and make it as simple as possible. Clive's journey and achievements. 1. The French attack on Madras, 1746. What happened? In 1746, the French attacked the British-held city of Madras in India. Clive's escape. Robert Clive was in Madras during this attack. To avoid being caught by the French, he sneaked out of the city at night. He dressed in disguise, avoided French soldiers, and walked to another nearby British fort called Fort St. David. 2. Training at Fort St. David. Meeting Stringer Lawrence. At Fort St. David, Clive met a British soldier named Stringer Lawrence. Lawrence was an experienced fighter who had fought against the French before. Learning to fight, Lawrence trained Clive in military skills, teaching him how to lead troops and fight effectively. Lawrence saw that Clive was a talented and promising soldier. Cost 3. Clive's military career. Becoming a lieutenant. With his new skills, Clive moved up in the military ranks. He became a lieutenant, which is a high rank in the army. He led a group of soldiers called the Company of Foot. Clive's skills. Clive was known for being bold and willing to take risks. These qualities helped him succeed in battle. Training of sepoys. British soldiers. The British began to train their own Indian soldiers, called sepoys, to fight like European soldiers. This meant they were taught to fight in organized groups and use modern weapons. Early challenges. At first, the sepoys were few in number and didn't have uniforms. They were still learning how to fight effectively. Victory at Arcot, 1751. The siege. In 1751, there was a major battle in a city called Arcot. The French and their allies were trying to take over the city. Clive's leadership. Clive led a small group of soldiers, 200 Europeans and 300 sepoys, to break the siege. They marched through heavy rain to reach Arcot. Surprising the enemy. Clive attacked the French and their allies during a thunderstorm, which was unexpected and risky. His successful attack forced the French to leave Arcot and showed that the British could win battles even against strong opponents. Simplified summary. Before the attack, Clive was in Madras when the French attacked. Escape. He sneaked out at night and went to Fort St. David. Training. At the fort, he learned military skills from an experienced soldier named Lawrence. Becoming a leader, Clive became a lieutenant and showed he was good at leading troops and taking risks. Training sepoys. The British started training Indian soldiers to fight like Europeans. Victory. Clive led a small siege on Arcot and won, which boosted the British confidence. Let's break this down in the simplest way. Horizontal distribution of pressure. What are isobars? Isobars. Imagine you have a map where lines are drawn to show places with the same air pressure. These lines are called isobars. Pressure intervals. These lines are spaced out at regular intervals of 3, 4, or 5 millibars. This helps us see where the pressure is high or low. How temperature affects pressure. Temperature and pressure. Temperature changes how dense the air is. Warm air. When air gets warm, it becomes lighter and rises. When this happens, the pressure at the surface goes down because there's less air pushing down. Cool air. When air gets cold, it becomes heavier and sinks. This makes the pressure at the surface go up because there's more air pushing down. Why does pressure change across the Earth? The Earth doesn't heat up evenly because of 1. Unequal sunlight, insolation. Different places get different amounts of sunlight. This causes some areas to be warmer than others. Example, the equator gets more sunlight and is warmer than the poles. 2. Land and water heating differently. Land heats up faster than water. Example, on a sunny day, the land near a beach gets hot quickly, while the sea stays cooler. This causes different pressure patterns. 3. Different reflectiveness, albedo. Some surfaces reflect sunlight while others absorb it. Dark surfaces like forests absorb more heat and get warmer. Light surfaces like ice reflect more sunlight and stay cooler. What happens when air rises or sinks? Warm air rising. When warm air rises, it leaves behind lower pressure at the surface. Example, on a hot day, the air over a city rises, causing lower pressure. Cool air sinking. When cool air sinks, it creates higher pressure at the surface. Example, on a cold day, the air over a city sinks, causing higher pressure. Summary. Isobars. Lines on a map showing equal pressure. Temperature and pressure. Warm air rises and lowers pressure. Cool air sinks and raises pressure. Uneven heating. Sunlight, land versus water, and surface reflectiveness cause different temperatures and pressures across the Earth.